Oh, Boston. Ah, man. The Celtics. A team that had high expectations entering this season after coming off of what I would argue is a highly exaggerated playoff run in which they found themselves not only in the conference finals but pushing a LeBron James-led Cavaliers team to a Game 7, which was deemed impressive because not only did you have a young core that was accomplishing a lot within their first 2 to 3 years in the NBA, but also this was a team that accomplished a lot without having their two best players in Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward available due to injuries. So with that level of success achieved, of course, just naturally many people again set the bar pretty high for the Celtics before the season began.
The Eastern Conference, I have some bad news. You're going to get your butts kicked this year by the Boston Celtics.
In the East, is it safe to say, I can never assume with you, are the Celtics your favorite to get out of the East?
Absolutely.
Philadelphia. I'm picking Boston to win the whole thing next year.
To me, there's only 3 teams in the NBA with championship ingredients: Golden State, Houston, and Boston.
Unfortunately for many, the Celtics would quickly fall short from many expectations, including their own, and even though this team gave us multiple opportunities to criticize them, and rightfully so, for whatever reason, this unit was just given the benefit of the doubt that they were going to flip a switch in the postseason and make a run to the finals, which to me is ludicrous because they have not earned that right. But again, was given the benefit of the doubt even after struggling against an Oladipo-less Indiana Pacers team in the first round. Thus bringing us to the semi-conference finals, in which the Boston Celtics found themselves matching up against the best team in the NBA record-wise with the Milwaukee Bucks, and yet still there were a plethora of people who still believed that the Boston Celtics were going to find a way to the conference finals.
No, man, are you kidding me? The Bucks are not going to make it out the second round. They got to see the Boston Celtics in the second round. Do you understand that?
I don't know where Milwaukee goes from here because.
Whoa. So is this over?
No, listen. I think it's over.
This series is over.
Yeah, they lost.
Game?
Well, I'm here to tell Chris Broussard the Bucks are done. They're done.
You're going full Paul Pierce.
Yeah.
And some of those predictions were validated after Game 1, but for the next 4 games, not only did the Celtics lose all of them to the Bucks, but they lost in such an embarrassing fashion that it forces us to reevaluate what this team has to offer moving forward. So let's do that. Let's break down who are the 2 individuals who are possibly the most to blame for why this team struggled this year, and how this season will affect the Boston Celtics moving forward, and why this year was such a massive disappointment. First things first, let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room, and that's Kyrie and his performance. Kyrie Irving is a young guard who spent his first 6 years in the NBA with the Cleveland Cavaliers, but found himself demanding a trade after what I would only label as a disagreement between him and the front office. After his trade demands, he was sent to the Boston Celtics, in which he was in a great situation. Now, personally, I do not subscribe to the idea that Kyrie wanted his own team. However, I'm not going to be in denial about how great of an opportunity this was. The Celtics were in the middle of their unorthodox rebuilding phase, and throughout the last handful of seasons, not only did they position themselves to grab some really quality young players through the draft, but also sign some veterans such as Al Horford, and in the same offseason went on to sign Gordon Hayward as well. So heading into this season, the expectations were set based off of what we saw from the Celtics in the prior year. Adding what many people were labeling the 2 best players back on the roster should mean that the 55 win mark that they saw in the previous season should be exceeded this year, and since they made it to the conference finals last season, that means that we should at least see a finals appearance and potentially even competing against the Golden State Warriors, but as we all know, none of that happened. And ironically enough, the reason why this season fell short is because of Kyrie. Now, during the regular season, his performance on the court was exceptional in my opinion, and I do believe he should receive an All-NBA selection. However, the things that were concerning about Kyrie were some of his antics and comments that he would make off of the court. The cryptic messages that he would send through the media, the private conversation that somehow became public that he had with LeBron James, and how hard it is to lead a team, which many people interpreted, including myself, as a subliminal diss towards his teammates, and how much of a headache it is to lead a young core who may not thoroughly understand what it really takes to win a championship, as if Kyrie has not ever been in that same situation at any point in his career. But for me, the biggest problem with Kyrie during the regular season was how he he started off the season being fairly open about the idea of re-signing with the organization, which for me was a good move by his part because this allowed Kyrie Irving to get in front of a lot of the rumors that potentially were going to be a distraction for this team, but then decided to publicly flip-flop on his answer, telling a reporter that he doesn't owe anyone anything and you should ask him the same question during the offseason, which honestly, I don't have that much of a problem with that answer, but again, if the whole purpose of you being candid about the opportunity to come back to this team in the beginning of the season was to get ahead of the rumors, why reignite those rumors by answering the question in the manner in which he did? And I would make an argument, as well as many other people who were around this team during the regular season, that those comments that Kyrie Irving made late in the season was a driving force for this team to finish with a record of 500 post All-Star break. But things only get worse during the playoffs. Many people were still giving the Boston Celtics the benefit of the doubt to succeed, and even though yes, they did sweep the Indiana Pacers in the first round, no one really performed all that well during that series, including Kyrie Irving, who struggled significantly. Kyrie's struggles would continue to follow him in the second round, in which in the last 4 games of a series in which they were embarrassingly beat in 5 games, Kyrie was horrendous, finishing his short postseason run averaging only 21 points while shooting below 40% from the field and 31% from behind the arc. To give even more insight to how poorly Kyrie performed during this playoff run, there was only 2 games in which he was able to shoot over 37% from the field, which is problematic for 2 reasons. One, let's be honest with ourselves, the bar that we have all set for Kyrie Irving as an individual performer is relatively low. We all accept the fact that Kyrie Irving is not a great defender, he's not a facilitator, and when it comes to his ability to score, a lot of it has to do with him being ball dominant. Yet we still give him the benefit of the doubt because how prolific of a scorer he really is. So when Kyrie struggles to score the way he did this postseason, then his flaws start to become magnified. And if you believe I'm being a bit overdramatic of how low of a bar we have set for Kyrie as an individual, even Kyrie shed some light on his own expectations of what he should be producing on a night in and night out basis. When prompted the question on how he will adapt to him struggling from the field in the Milwaukee Bucks series, his response did not have to do with him playing defense, facilitating, grabbing rebounds, or anything else outside of just shooting more shots.
Still put my teammates in great positions while still being aggressive. I'm trying to do it all. So, for me, the 22 shots, I should have shot 30.
Which thus brings me to the second concern for Kyrie. I believe many of us, including myself, have given Kyrie the benefit of the doubt in the sense of how he produces as an individual performer without putting into consideration that possibly he benefited significantly by playing next to LeBron. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that this playoff run overshadows everything that Kyrie has accomplished leading up to this season, but what I am saying is that in many aspects, Kyrie more than likely benefited significantly playing alongside a superstar. And because of this epiphany, I do believe, until proven otherwise, Kyrie Irving cannot be the best player on a championship team. Now, I don't believe that is a massive knock on Kyrie, as there's only a handful of players who can say that they have earned that title, but I do believe it does add some clarification on the limitations of what Kyrie Irving can and cannot do, and it does allow us to be a bit more realistic on what we should expect from Kyrie Irving moving forward, which will obviously play a big role in what the Celtics will do in the upcoming months. And before I make that transition, let me first talk about Gordon Hayward very briefly. Gordon Hayward in many respects seems untouchable in this conversation just because of the injury in which he sustained in the beginning of the prior season. And because I do not understand the severity of his injury nor the recovery time and what it may have done to him mentally and his confidence, because it definitely came across as if all of that was just shot throughout the entire season, there does need to be an indirect conversation about Hayward and the unjustifiable opportunities that he received throughout the entire year. Because coming off of a season-ending injury, it made absolutely no sense that Hayward immediately received a starting role for this team at the beginning of the year. That role immediately was snatched away from him after 15 games of mediocrity, but Hayward continued to receive questionable minutes for the remainder of the season, which was problematic because not only was Hayward at best inconsistent in the games in which he was playing in, but you also had to take into consideration that other players, most noticeably Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, had to make adjustments around a player that was not producing anything close to what they were producing on a night in, night out basis, which not only hurt this team in the win-loss column, but also helped restrict the development that we were supposed to see from the two young swingmen that just got done leading this team to the conference finals. And even though what I'm about to say next may not sound fair, but let's not forget we're talking about Danny Ainge here, trading Gordon Hayward should have been a necessity this year. Because the level of productivity seen from Hayward this year can not only be produced by other players on the team, but also you could easily acquire someone at a fraction of the price to duplicate the exact same numbers and productivity from Gordon Hayward even before the injury. And financially speaking, the amount of money that Hayward gets paid not only financially cripples this team moving forward, but also limits them in the free agency market, because this year should be the year in which Danny Ainge pulled the trigger at a max contract, but not giving that money to someone who only eclipsed over 20 points per game once throughout their entire career. And this is a revelation that should have been prompted as soon as Jason Tatum provided more than enough evidence in his rookie year that he could be better than Gordon Hayward. Which brings us to the conflicting conclusion to this 2019 Boston Celtics team, because the thesis to why the Boston Celtics were supposed to be championship contenders was heavily based off of the success in which they accomplished in the prior season in light of them missing their two best players. But ironically, when the two best players in Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward were added to the team, it was very clear that those two players played the biggest role in holding this team back from their full potential. And before I go any further, let me be clear that I do not believe that this team was properly constructed to best utilize the potential of players such as Kyrie Irving and Jason Tatum. I believe the best way to utilize Kyrie Irving is in a more ball-dominant offense in which Kyrie Irving plays a very similar role that Isaiah Thomas once had, but the problem with that is that A, turning Jason Tatum into the new Jay Crowder would be a gross misutilization of his talents, but B, and more importantly, it became very clear this season that Kyrie Irving can't be the best player on your roster, which thus forces the Celtics to go after a more talented piece. The only problem with this is that since Gordon Hayward is grossly overpaid, the only way that they can acquire a superstar talented player is through trade. Which brings us to the daunting decision that has to be made. Trading for Anthony Davis is a luxury that only a handful of teams in the NBA possess, and acquiring a player as talented as AD exponentially raises your odds of winning a championship. However, with Anthony Davis's injury-plagued history, as well as the ever-changing Eastern Conference, nothing is promised. Also keep in mind everything that this organization endured this year with Kyrie Irving potentially leaving them in the offseason, they would have to go through again with Anthony Davis, meaning more than likely the only way to convince Anthony Davis to stay once his contract expires is to actually compete for a championship, something that this team was unable to accomplish this year, so the appeal of playing with Boston has really diminished within the last 6 to 12 months. And that is why this year is such a disappointment. For years now, the Celtics have been moving in the right direction, and from those moves have been timely decisions from Danny Ainge in which he has had full control of one of the more unorthodox but very successful rebuilds that we have seen in a very long time. But in a year in which that rebuild became extremely vulnerable once Danny Ainge removed his control and put it in the hands of Kyrie Irving, Kyrie failed him miserably and stripped away a lot of the appeal that this organization has earned. The Boston Celtics were a team that entered this year with some questions and a lot of promise, but by the end of the season, none of those questions were answered, and the promise has quickly evaporated, and in its place, a level of concern has manifested itself that has forced everyone to acknowledge that this year was a massive disappointment for this organization. And with that being said, please let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. The Boston Celtics, Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, and what would you do next if you were Danny Ainge? Thank you for watching the video. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Peace.